I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women. Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, my name is Anna and I am the Natural Birth Podcast host. I'm a former midwife who left the system and I'm now the proud founder of Sacred Birth International, a woman-owned company with a mission to revolutionize the birth world and bring focus to the sacred and the natural intelligence of the birth process. We do this by providing world-class education, courses, programs, and coaching to equip women with the knowledge and the tools to have conscious pregnancies, empowering and positive birth experiences, and the most nourishing start possible for themselves and their babies postpartum. We also educate and mentor aspiring birth workers into sacred space holders and physiological birth advocates in the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, the Beyond a Doula training. If you'd like to work with me or take any of our courses, programs, or the mentorship, then head on over to sacredbirthinternational.com to find out more. Hi, Nicole, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Anna. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I've actually been at it this morning doing plum jam. It was supposed to be plum jam.
Oh,
I added a bit too much water, so it became plum juice and then a little bit of plum jam. So that's
whatever works, whatever works.
Yeah.
As long as you're making good use of it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I felt very domestic this morning because I had to like pick out all the pits from the plums because I just put them all in a big the big batch of it all in a pot, and then I had to like do it, and it took me forever, but it was a really great meditation, just standing there
Yes.
one pit at a time, like hundreds of pits.
Yes.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
and you'll remember that when you're enjoying the jam / juice.
I know. So that's
Very
where I'm at. I'm just pitted out from doing that.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, yeah, and I'm actually up here visiting with my family right now. So this is the first time that I've come up to the city where I was born and brought my daughter to spend time with her grandparents here. So very nice and happy to be able to be spending that time here while I'm on my maternity leave.
That's beautiful. How long is your maternity leave for?
So it was originally planned to be about 12 weeks. That's pretty standard for kind of what, people here in the US get. I was really fortunate to get full 12 weeks of paid leave. And then I work with a really incredible company that was very flexible with me. I know not so many mamas here in the US are as blessed as I was with that, but I'm not going back until October. So it'll be about 21 weeks since her birth that I will be going back. And luckily, I work from home and I'll be having some care come to the home. I'm very committed to our breastfeeding journey, so it's important for me to have my baby close. So I feel very fortunate to be in the situation that I've been able to be in so far.
Yeah, I always feel for the US mamas.
Yes.
So happy that you had that arrangement and can work from home and all of that to more serve the mama baby diet for a longer time. Yeah, it breaks my heart for women who doesn't have that opportunity. Of course, financially, it's definitely a financial question, isn't it? If women can or cannot in so many countries around the world as well.
Absolutely. And I know because I had gone through the process, typically here they only really allow for 6 weeks of paid leave, which I bring myself back to, exactly 6 weeks postpartum. And, we had some breastfeeding challenges. So I just can't even imagine, have going back to work on that particular day. So yeah, I hold those mamas dear in my heart that have struggled with that, and just feel grateful every day to have the opportunity to spend even one more day, solely with my baby. So it's really special time.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Ah, well, we're here to talk about your birth story, aren't we?
Yes, yes. I'm
Do
super
you,
excited to share.
yeah, do you want to like take us back to like becoming pregnant? Is that a story you want to kind of share with us?
Yeah, I think it's relevant too. It really was a full journey from like that initial finding out through the decisions made along the way. So I fell pregnant when I was 30 years old. It was an unplanned pregnancy. We are beyond grateful for her every moment, but initially it was unplanned. So kind of going into things, I'm a big researcher. I like to research things, like to know before I jump into anything. And I never really had the time to really understand, all of the options that surround birth before I fell pregnant. So I spent, the early part of my pregnancy really educating myself and jumping into that space. And so, when I first found out I was pregnant, I did kind of what, I thought everyone here in the US does. Make an appointment with an OBGYN provider, have them confirm the pregnancy. I actually was with an OBGYN provider all the way up until 32 weeks of my pregnancy. So I did, everything kind of standard of care, which is, you get an ultrasound around 12 weeks, an anatomy scan around 20. I did like all the blood work, all the testing, the gestational diabetes, like, everything that they kind of have lined up as the standard of care within the medical system in the US. I didn't necessarily have a bad experience with that. I will say, there was one particular day that I recall that really said, wow, this isn't going to be the right environment for me to deliver my baby in. And I'll share a little bit on that. But basically, I had come in, I was asking some questions to one of the midwives, and I said, because it's very common in my family for women to go 41 plus, over that estimated due date period. And she said to me, if you're still pregnant at 41 weeks, we will absolutely be inducing, like, you're putting your baby in danger. And for me as a first time mama, it was less about what she said and more about how she said it to me, in terms of like kind of getting on this soapbox of like, I know everything, you must listen to me, very much like fear mongering discussion. And that really turned me off from everything within that office, because I had gotten little bits of that throughout, but I was kind of just ignored it because I was like, it's not a big deal, whatever. But as soon as that came in, where she's like, this is our hard and fun, like, this is our hard deadline, I was like, I think I really need to start looking elsewhere outside of this system. And then also just the fact that when you give birth in that sort of environment, it's like whoever is there that day and on call is who delivers your baby. And there were some midwives that I liked and some that I just didn't jive with. So energetically, not knowing who was going to be in my birth space the day that I gave birth was another big flag for me. So that's when I started looking at alternative options at that point.
I love that. And I think, it goes to show so much, like most first time mamas will go to like 40 plus 10 days.
Yeah.
Like that's a very normal time to have your first baby. And so having that hard line, as she says, it's so detrimental to so many mothers and babies. I mean, most mamas and babies today are even kind of pressured into inducing and evicting, the baby much earlier than that, even 40, even 39 weeks, some kind of advocate for. And yeah, it's sad. It's a big problem, I think, for long-term and short-term consequences for mom and pop to do that.
Yeah. And I've really become a big part of just mama communities around my area. And I hear all the time just stories of other women where it's like, yeah, I was very late, so I was induced. And I was like, oh, well, when did you go into to be induced? They're like, oh, 41 plus 1, 41 plus 2. And I'm just that's why I come back to your podcast, because learning all of these different stories and hearing stories from women where it's like, I was 41 plus 5, whatever, and just really getting down to the basis of it's an estimated due date.
Yeah.
So, it's really important to be aware of that. And that really empowered me to say, like I said, something's not right here. I think I need to look for something else.
Absolutely. And for some moms and babies, it's 43 weeks. That's normal for them, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, that baby who's being evicted at 40 plus two or whatever might have had 2 or 3 more weeks that they wanted to be in the womb. And it's estimated. So we don't know exactly the conception date, right? We just don't. And especially
Absolutely.
some women who have PCOS or irregular cycles. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have a regular cycle. So that did worry me a bit of like, I don't know when I'm going to go into labor. And I
Mm.
guess it was kind of crazy to me to think, because the idea that she told me at the time was, around that time, the placenta is going to stop working.
Oh God, that's so
So
rough.
my body is so incredible and so intelligent to get pregnant, to create this beautiful baby from nothing. And then at 41 weeks on the dot, the organ that my body made to sustain the baby is just gonna, yeah, I think we're done here.
I'm
So
done. I'm retiring. I'm gonna stop the blood flow. Yeah, that's not true. It's just not true. And it's such a myth that is being perpetuated by people that you think are practicing evidence-based care. It's quite scary, the language and the just the tales that go around and it gets repeated, even though they actually don't hold truth. It's crazy that it's
absolutely.
actually still going on. It's so
Yeah.
prevalent. Yeah.
And that's, I
Anyway,
was,
yeah,
go
you
ahead.
decided to that was not your thing and you started looking for an alternative.
Yeah. And so I knew kind of the alternatives from there would be, find another hospital team, either look at a birthing center or potentially do a home birth. I wasn't really interested in looking for another hospital team because I suspected that I would get similar narratives and similar, we don't know who's going to deliver your baby. It's just based on who's there type mentality. So I did interview a birthing center and then also a midwifery team that does home births. I ended up deciding to go with the midwifery team that does home birth. For me, the birthing center was a great option. I just felt like, if I can have the same experience, but have it in my living room instead of having to drive, 30 minutes when I'm in active labor to go have the experience somewhere else, it just made a lot more sense to me. And also, the birthing center was similar to the hospital in that it was like, hey, we want you to meet all of our midwives, and then whoever's there will be your person. Like for me and for feeling safe within my birth space, I wanted to know, like, when I met the midwives I worked with locally, I was like, you two, you are my women. Like, you are going to be there for me that day. And I know I can count on you. And that really allowed me to feel safe internally within my decision and who was going to be sharing that sacred space with me. So as soon as I interviewed them, I knew that they were going to be the right ones for me. And I was just completely hooked. I had like basically a spiritual mentor locally who I had worked with over the last couple of years. And she actually worked with this midwifery team to do a home birth. And she was actually the first person I had ever in my whole life heard of even doing a home birth. So she was the one that kind of initially lit the light of like, oh, wow, this is even an option. To be honest, I hadn't really even known that it existed. I had never known anybody besides her who had done a home birth. And, frankly, when I shared the information that of what I was thinking about home birth, I kind of got you're doing what? Like, the raised eyebrows, is that safe? A lot of questions kind of came up. But by then I was really rooted in my decision and knew that that's what I wanted to do, just intuitively and spiritually. So I was really excited about my decision, but it was certainly for somebody who's kind of the first in their, family group, lineage, or whatever in recent times to do something like that. It can be a bit of an eyebrow raiser for people who don't really understand the space.
Absolutely. And that's the story that most women tell, that.
Yeah.
And my advice and what women tend to do is to just not tell people that aren't aligned, to kind of protect the seed of that idea and protect their space. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely did that too. But I also tried to, share it with some people that I'm close with, but maybe weren't fully aligned, as a way to, continue to spread that education about the safety and the beauty that that sort of experience can bring. And that was definitely a nice thing to be able to spread in any way that I can.
Yeah, definitely when people are open and they will not, kind of criticize you or like put you into fear spin or, you know, be super negative, then it's a beautiful thing. Of course, share it with your loved ones and friends that you feel can be open to hearing, you know, and respecting your choices. I think that's the key, isn't it? Like to just protect yourself from anyone who would not. Because of course, as you know, when you're pregnant, you're just so sensitive too. And the veils are so thin. And yeah, you need to protect you and your baby and the energy and the space for you too as well.
Absolutely. Especially as I got closer to labor and delivery, I built a strong bubble around me to really protect that space. So I definitely resonate with that. And, you know, I think it's interesting too. And I'm just going to provide like ballpark figures because I think this is impactful for mamas in the US. You know, when I decided to do a home birth, you know, I had concerns related to the cost of it because even though the cost of a hospital birth is, you know, 10 times, I don't know the multiples, I'm just completely ballpark here, it's much more expensive to have an in-hospital birth with or without interventions than it would be to have a home birth. My insurance would not cover a home birth.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, it was much more expensive for me out of pocket to have a home birth than it would have been for me to make the decision to have that in the hospital. And, you know, at the time that did weigh on me in terms of a decision point. I'm really glad that I went with the home birth that I did. I knew that it would be an investment and an experience that would, you know, change me and last with me my entire lifetime. So best investment ever. I just think it's super interesting, the dynamic of that within the US, where it's like, you know, it could actually be a lot more cost effective and potentially safer for women to deliver at home. But because that's not, you know, seen as the standard of care in any way, it's like, you know, I end up and most mamas, I believe in the US, end up having to pay out of pocket for that level of care.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's crazy. I've seen the bills for people in the US having hospital births and just like, and of course, yeah, insurance might cover some of it or most of it. But I'm glad you followed what you felt. And, you know, according to evidence, if you're a healthy mama with a healthy baby on board, which, you know, most women are, then you're actually more safe having a home birth than a hospital birth today because of the cascade of interventions that causes
Absolutely.
trauma to mom and bub on all levels, but physical as well, you know, for sure. So
Absolutely.
if people actually knew, which is, you know, why it's so great that you're coming on and that women will come on and share their stories, because then we have the opportunity to inform, especially first time mamas around. I mean, I really wish that women didn't see their first as like a trial run. I'll just do it in hospital because, you know, and the next one, like, because it might just end up costing you so much more. Not costing money, but like costing you on so many levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I met a mom recently in community where she said she had her first birth in a hospital, second birth at a birthing center, third birth at home. I was like, you know, I think I'll just skip to the home birth with my first and see how it goes from there. So glad that I did that. And, you know, it's people sharing their stories and sharing, you know, how wonderful it can be, that allows for people to feel confident in that decision too.
Yeah. When did you
Feel
find this
confident.
podcast? When did you find the Natural Birth podcast?
Probably at the end of my first trimester.
That's good. So you had
Yeah.
plenty of time to listen. And was that a contributing factor to having a home birth, to choosing to have a home birth?
Absolutely, yes. Especially I think for people like me, right, who don't really know too many people, or like I said, I knew of one, but it was recent, and you know, it felt very much kind of like painting outside the lines of, you know, what's appropriate. And when you're doing that with something as big as a decision as having a child and bringing a child into the world, that's it's a big deal. So I think it's really important to be able to have those references and resources of other women who have said, you know, I have done this and this is how it impacted me.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's dive into your birth story, shall we?
Yes, let's do it. So the crazy thing is, you know, I was always thinking that I told myself she's going to be, you know, over the due date. And I thought she was going to come on a full moon. I'm a big moon you know, lover. And I was like, she's going to come on a full moon, but she surprised me. So I actually went into labor, early labor, on my estimated due date right on that morning. And it was a crescent moon, so the complete opposite of what I thought. So it was a little bit funny how that worked. You know, I woke up that morning and I was just like, I had a chiropractor appointment that morning that I was supposed to go to. Usually it's like super early, like at 8:30. And I woke up and I was just so tired that morning. I was like, I really need some more sleep. Like I need to rest. Like I can't go to this appointment right now. So I pushed the appointment out to a little bit later in the day and just went back to bed, which is very outside of character for me. So I went back to bed, had a few more hours of sleep, and then woke up, made a little breakfast, started texting my doula. She actually had texted me that morning, like, happy due date. How are you feeling? And I was like, I'm starting to have some cramps, but there's no way this could be it. Like, it's my due date. Like, I'm sure this is just, body practicing, doing things like that. So kind of just decided to go on with my day. I did go to the chiropractor, and then I stopped at the grocery store too, got like a big sandwich, like a huge burger smash burger sandwich, ate a ton of food that afternoon. And then I started noticing a pattern, right? It was, every 15 minutes, minimal intensity. It wasn't anything too bad. So at that point, I was like, I could take some calls. I started working. I sat down at my desk. I really enjoy my job. So I had a couple of calls to take that day. So, I did take those calls. And I got to the point later in the afternoon where I was like, I feel like I should be timing these because they're getting more frequent and more intense. So when I wrapped up my workday, like around 4:30, I said to my partner, I was like, we got to let the midwives know. Cause I had been texting my doula all day long, kind of giving her, the tidbits of what I was feeling and how I felt like a pattern was starting and the intensity was growing. But at that point, it was like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I was still able to talk through the contractions. It was maybe 5 to 7 minutes apart at that point. So, getting things rolling, but nothing too intense yet. So we did call the midwives at that point, and just kind of gave them a heads up. I was the one who called the midwives at that point. I think that was the only time in the rest of the evening that I was the one doing the call. But yes, I let them know, and they were like, okay, like they recommended doing like the mile circuit and having some more food and things like that. So, intuitively, I was like, I don't feel like doing the mile circuit. I just want to go lay in bed with my peanut ball in between my legs and relax and listen to my hypnobirthing recordings. So hypnobirthing was a big part of my labor and delivery prep. I loved the classes that I took with the practitioner and the book that I had read. So it was really helpful for me. So I just laid in bed, listened to my recordings, and just tried to, soak in the moment. I think at that time I was still sort of in denial. I'm like, well, maybe it'll fizzle out. Like maybe this really isn't it. I don't know why I had that kind of denial mindset going into it. I think it was just because I was so excited that I'm like, oh, like I almost don't want to let myself get hopeful that this is it. But obviously as it continued to progress, there was undoubtedly the time. So yeah, I just spent some time in my bed that evening. I was by myself, which was really nice to spend a little bit of time just with myself, listening to my recordings, just really getting in the zone. And after that, so I was probably in bed for about, 30 minutes to an hour. I was like, what I really want is I really want to take a hot shower. So I went and took a very long hot shower by myself, and I really felt it starting to pick up from there. So after spending that kind of 2-hour window by myself, I went back out to our living room, and I was like, said to my partner, I was like, we really need to start timing these and really getting an idea of kind of, how far apart they are. Cause when I was in my room and I was by myself, I was really just enjoying it, kind of letting it come and go, and just, enjoying the fact that the intensity wasn't too bad, and that I could really start preparing for what was about to come. So when I went out and started to be with my partner, he was like, so when do I start? When do I stop? Like, and I was getting to the point for me at that point where my intensity was so strong that I wasn't really able to communicate during contraction. So I was like, if I stop talking, that's probably a good time to hit the start button on that. So, so we did a little bit of that. I was just kind of like, walking around the house, petting my dogs, like still trying to kind of, you know, just be home, be in my space and enjoy it. And then we did give the doula and the midwives another call, just kind of updated them where things are at. And then at that point, we did ask our doula to come over. So it was great to have her support. She was there probably around 9 p.m. So that was really, really nice to have her there. She still to this day is like my absolute angel. Like there's no replication or no replacement for the support that a doula can provide. So I was really appreciative that she came pretty early in the process, because as a first-time mama too, and my partner being first time, we really wanted that support from somebody early on in the process. So that was really, really, really lovely.
I love that.
Yes, yes. I can't recommend them enough. When people ask me like, oh, what's a doula? I'm like, oh, please look it up, understand their role, because they're just so, so, so special in the birth space.
Yeah, absolutely. They can just really give you that one-on-one support continuously, just that depending on obviously who you resonate with and who you are, but that spiritual, emotional, more comforting support, like also early, if you have a longer labor, like earlier than maybe the midwife who needs to obviously be alert because she has a medical responsibility too, right? So
Absolutely.
some people can go like, oh, isn't it enough just with a midwife? And of course it can be. Like, of course it can be. It depends on your relationship and also how quick your labor is. But if you have a longer one, you might want to have that early support by someone else.
Yes. And one thing I learned throughout my pregnancy is I love support. I want all the support. I had, the midwives, the doula, I did chiropractic care, acupuncture, pelvic floor therapy, massages, like anything that you can do as a pregnant person to stay well and healthy and prepare for a healthy delivery. I was doing. So yeah, I'm a big support person.
I love that. Same. I'm an advocate for that. I think it's so important. It's not just like reading the books and doing the courses. It's like the holistic preparation, body, mind, and soul for that big days potentially
Absolutely.
of birthing new life.
Yes. And just having people who believe in you as well, right? Like you believe in yourself, and surrounding yourself with people who believe in you and are super hands-on in the experience for me was just a big part of what made it so special.
I love that.
Yes.
So your doula comes over.
Yes. So when she came over, I had kind of migrated back to the bed. I loved laying in bed on my side with the peanut ball in between and kind of moving back and forth from side to side.
Beautiful.
I could not lay on my back at all. I was like in extreme pain, even just like rolling from side to side. I was like, oh, not on my back. Like I did not want to be on my back. So when she came, I was just kind of switching back and forth, and it was getting very intense, and the contractions were very close together. So, it was still pretty early on in the process. And she was like, do you maybe want to try to get into the bath, maybe get in some water? Would that be something that you would like? And at that point, I was like, yes, that sounds perfect. So we filled up the bathtub. I kind of hung my affirmations around there. We had some just nice like candles that were, the battery operated ones that flicker. So it was just the perfect environment. And I got into the bathtub, and we learned that day that the plug that keeps the water in was not working. So I would get in and the water would kind of go out and I would get cold again. So we quickly deterred away from that. So definitely a good thing to maybe check your bathtub before you want to labor in there. But obviously did not let that get me down. I, from there, kind of transferred back into the bedroom and did a little bit of like hands and knees positioning on a ball, kind of holding myself up. That was kind of the main position. I liked the hands and knees with the arms up, laying in bed. And then loved being on the toilet too. So it was a surprise for me. I loved being on the toilet, just kind of backwards facing on the toilet, kind of had some pillows on the other end, just like almost made a little bit of a bed out of it. So at that point, we were just kind of moving through those different positions, what felt good for me in that moment. And then at one point, pretty soon thereafter, so this is probably inching towards midnight at this point, my water broke when I was on hands and knees in my bedroom. So it was for me like not a trickle, it was like a gush. It was a lot. So that there was no mistaking it at that point. And I got excited when that happened because I knew, I was like, okay, like, you know how I said before, I was kind of in this like denial phase. I'm like, is it really happening? I'm like, this is happening and we are deep in it. And I think that's really when I triggered into like true like labor land, where I was like, you know, kind of aware of what was going on around me, but so deeply called inside. And yeah, that was a special moment in terms of like really, really being like inside my body, just so connected to my body. So I really remember that kind of switch of motion into that space, which was really special.
Mm. And when that happened, did things intensify?
Yes, for sure. Just closer together and raised in intensity. And I believe that my partner and my doula had been at that point in touch with my midwives more frequently. I don't know how often they were talking to her or them together, but at that point, I knew that I had two midwives. The first one was going to come over around 1:30. We still had about an hour and a half before they got there. So I just kind of continued to mostly labor on the toilet. That was like where I was mostly, once it started to get more and more intense, that's where I wanted to be. And, you know, I know my doula and my partner were trying different things like the counter pressure, and I didn't want any of that, like no pressure, no nothing. The only thing that I was willing to have was like light touch massage. Other than that, I was like, nobody touch me, just let me kind of be in my space, do my thing. Like it was already so intense. I just didn't want any more intense sensations added to the bucket of the intensity that was going on. So
Yeah.
I continued to labor there. And then around 1:30, my midwife came, and like seeing her was like seeing an angel. Cause for me, it was partly like, okay, like we're really getting somewhere if she's here. So I was really excited to see her. And at that point, she offered to do a cervical check. I hadn't done any checks up until that point. And in the moment, you know, going into it, I was like, I don't know if this is something that I'll want to do. But in the moment, I was like, you know what? Like, yes, I would like to know kind of moment of time where I'm at right now. So we did do the cervical check. And at that point, I was 8 centimeters dilated. And baby was progressing downward pretty quickly. I was more dilated on one side than the other. So we started doing some positions to encourage the opening on the other side. And yeah, for me in that moment, it was like, I knew that I was pretty close, but just hearing that kind of validation of like, here's where you at was really exciting. I was like, okay, like we're really close now. So it was also just comforting for me to have her there. I think that helped kind of progress labor even more quickly, just the safety of her presence. And just knowing that she was there. You know, I think giving birth where you feel safe is so important. The more safe that I felt in my birth space, the more quickly I felt things progressing.
Yeah.
And another big learning for me through the labor process was just how important my breathing and the vocalization I was using was. Because if I would raise my voice in intensity, I just felt stagnant energy. But when I really like deep sounds and like pushing down, I could feel her descending. Like it was the most incredible thing ever to just feel like how your breath impacts that process of the baby moving downward. And just the way that when you increase that feeling of safety, also how you're able to increase the speed, or just like the natural progression. I think it's less speed and more just natural progression of that opening and the progression through labor.
I love that. Like that is like two major key like takeaways and pearls of wisdoms that is just so true. Like sound, the power of sound. It is, I cannot say it enough. Like it is so powerful when we really use sound to help us. And even outside of birthing, just sounding is actually so powerful. It's medicine, truly. And then, of course, safety, like everything for a birthing woman to feel emotionally safe, physically safe, just safe on all levels. I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that you also identify that so clearly in your story.
Yeah. And it was really beautiful to be able to be like that present and just feel the impact of both of those things at once. So it was incredible. And at that point I was like, where's the second midwife? Because I wanted her to be there too. I wanted both of them there, because actually my whole goal all along was to have a water birth and to have it, have her in the tub. And the second midwife was the one who had the pool, and she wasn't there yet. So the pool was not set up. There was no water in the pool. And this is at, 1:30 in the morning, roughly. And, as a first time mama, it was really intense. I was like, what if she's going to be born? Like, it could be 5 minutes from now. I don't know. Nobody else seemed too worried, because they said, at that point I wasn't pushy yet. We still had some more time. So I just continued to labor. And then eventually she did come, my second midwife. They started setting up the pool. And they were actually having some troubles with getting the water hookup for the pool. It was, at that point, I was so internal that I knew it was happening, but I was just like, I have to trust that this is going to happen, and it's all going to be good. If I have this baby on the toilet, then I have the baby on the toilet, and we'll just have to rock with whatever happens. So yeah, she did end up coming. They set up the pool. The water was good. So I was able to lean into that trust, and that actually was what happened. And it was prepared before I needed to even really be in it. But I would have liked to have had it, I think, a little bit sooner, looking back, just that way I could have actually labored in it. So that was like a learning for me for next time, is like, maybe have that already set up, maybe not with the water, but have the pool there and have it set up so that it's more of an option for laboring and not just for births. That was definitely something that I learned. I loved being in the water at that time too. So yeah, so I continued to labor on the toilet, and then I transitioned to the bed. And when I was in the bed, this was probably starting around 3 in the morning now, I started to feel the push. And this was a big, like, wow moment for me too, because I always thought, pushing was a conscious mind thing. Like, you say, now it's time to push. Okay, I think, and I push. And my uterus was just like, no thinking required. Like, we got this. And it was almost like a fight for me, where I was like fighting against the pressure of my uterus, because it was so strong. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is really intense. Like, I need to slow this down. But I got to the point where I was like, there's no slowing this down. You just have to breathe, and you have to just let it do what it's going to do. So I was in bed doing some of that pushing for a little while. And then at that point, it got time to get into the water. So I was really excited for that. So I was like, okay, we're finally actually almost there.
Wow, exciting.
That was really, really exciting. And then I transitioned into the water. That was when I started getting really pushy, like really, really pushy, very close together. And I was holding on to my partner for a while, probably for about 20 minutes. And then my midwife said, like, if you want him to catch the baby, which was the plan all along, was for him to catch the baby. She was like, he has to come back here, because I was against the pool, kind of had my arms up on the pool, like holding on to him. And my legs were kind of turned in towards each other in the water. So she was coming out the back. So I was like, at first I was like, no, I need him here. And then I was like, no, like, really want him to catch the baby. So we sent him back there, and then my doula took over. So I was able to hold on to her and really have like that support person right there for me. And a couple of contractions later, I was able to reach down and I felt her head. So that was a really cool moment. I was like, oh my gosh, like, she's really coming now. Like, she's really here. And then, just a few more contractions from there, and she came right out the back, and Dad was able to catch her, with the support of our midwives. And it was just so amazing. Her cord was in between my legs. So I kind of had to do a maneuver where I, kind of jumped over the cord, and then they brought her to my chest, and she was just so peaceful. Like, she was just looking around, kind of taking it all in, and she didn't cry at first. She was just, like I said, peaceful is the only way that I can really describe it. She looked right at her dad and looked at me, and she started pinking up beautifully. So there was never really a concern about her health. She just looked so wonderful. And then she did cry a few minutes after that, just kind of let out a little bit of a cry, nothing too big. But it was so nice. And I just kind of sat in the tub with her for, probably 10 to 15 minutes. And yeah, it's like hard to even believe, that just happened. It was really incredible.
Wow. What a beautiful story.
It was amazing. And was just really special. I mean, we had her right in our bedroom, and this is might sound silly to some people who don't understand the love of dogs, but for me, a big reason I wanted a home birth too, one of many, was that my dogs were able to be there. So, some people say, bring a blanket home and let your dog sniff it. I was like, I'll just have my baby in front of my dogs and they'll know it's ours.
And how did they
But
react to it? Like, how were they with you in labor, and how did they react at the birth?
yeah, they definitely knew, it's incredible. They knew early on, they would lay near my belly and just kind of like be close to me. Like they knew. I feel like they could sense the presence of her from early on. And then, when I was laboring, I have pictures of me like laboring in bed and my dog's just laying right against me, just kind of being there and being present. And then once she was born, like I have a video of him just kind of like walking up to the pool, and he like looks over and he's just kind of taking it all in. And I reached out and I gave him a little pet, and he was just like loving to be there. So I felt like, they have a deeper knowing than I think a lot of people give them credit for. So it was really cool to experience that, and to have them there, right? It goes back to feeling safe. Like those dogs are like my children, and having them be safe in my environment was a big contributor, I think, to me just feeling super comfortable, is to have my first babes there too. So it was really, really special moment with them.
I love that. That's gorgeous. How beautiful.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay in the pool for after the birth?
Probably about 10 to 15 minutes. And at that point, my midwives were like, kind of asking me where I was planning to deliver the placenta. So I was like, let me get out of the water. I'd like to dry off. I was getting a little chilly at that point. So they just kind of laid out some liners in the bed, and I was able to just kind of jump right up into my bed with baby on my chest. We definitely had that full, I think it was more than an hour of just kind of skin to skin baby with me. My whole plan, I wanted to keep the placenta attached for over an hour. Like I wanted to deliver the placenta and, have it there with the baby and everything. So, when I got into the bed, they were like, are you feeling contractions? Are you feeling it? And I really wasn't feeling much. But they did say that the placenta was detached at that point. So I don't know exactly what they did, but they did support me in kind of delivering that placenta. And so the placenta was delivered at about 30 minutes. I think that was like one of the moments that I was like a little fearful too, was like, oh my gosh, I just had this beautiful home birth, and is this placenta going to come out? Like, is it going to come out? But it did. And it was, pretty seamless from there. And they just put it in a bowl right beside me, and I just had my baby there in bed, and we were all just kind of there. And it was like, a big sense of relief, because at that moment it's like, okay, like birth is complete, and now we can just enjoy the moment.
Yeah, birth is not complete until the placenta is birthed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it sounds like they did a bit of controlled cord traction. So did they kind of pull a little bit gently on the cord to help them?
Very gently. Yes,
Yeah.
very, very gently. And yeah, it came out super easily from there. And like I said, it was definitely a sigh of relief, to know that, all pieces of the birth had been completed at that point.
And then you can just snuggle up with your baby.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was interested early on from kind of letting her kind of find her way to the breast too, kind of learned a little bit about the breast crawl before. So it was cool to kind of just see her try to navigate there. And yeah, we actually got latched, I believe, in that first hour too, kind of towards the end. And, just a little one, just kind of getting a little suckling a little bit. But it's just incredible how they come out just knowing, where to go and what to do. And the fact that I think it's the colostrum smells like amniotic fluid, right? They say, so they kind of know where to go. So that was pretty incredible to actually see that.
That's amazing. You got to experience that.
Yes. Yeah, it was incredible.
And that's really, one of the benefits of having a natural physiological birth is that most babies come out very alert and very ready to breastfeed, very ready for that breast crawl. I mean, some come out and they're pretty sleepy because they're just in a sleep cycle when they're being birthed, which is pretty funny that you can be. But they go through their cycles throughout the whole labor process. And some can be a little bit taken back from the journey. But I would say most, percentage-wise, most babies that are born naturally, physiologically, without any kind of interference, are so ready. They're so alert, like big eyes, and like they also have this surge of adrenaline. They have this surge to like to find the breast, to transition into earth life. It's all priming them throughout the labor, and the stress of labor and birth is actually something that needs to happen for the baby to take its first breaths and do all the things that initiates life on earth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I think a lot of people think about the woman's experience in birth, but it has to be intense for the baby too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Absolutely. You're going through a very small space. You're being very squeezed. I think it's intense for the baby too. So when you think about that kind of the journey together, right, it really is, a journey together is really the only way that I can think about that. Right. So, yeah, it was beautiful. And, those first few moments, there's nothing like it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really important for people to know that the natural birth process, the stress that causes the baby, is good stress.
Yeah, that helps them be resilient, right?
Yeah, and it really is really important to initiate life on earth. Like, there's so many processes that happens because of the hormones released and the stress of the labor and birth, that when you do have a cesarean, cold, or you are, like having any kind of other, like synthetic oxytocin that creates very, like, the artificial really contractions that are much stronger and sometimes tighter together, and just it's a totally different experience also for the baby.
Absolutely.
And that's really also important to just take into consideration as you choose things for your labor and birth.
Yes. And I think that's part of why I always knew from the beginning that I wanted to have a natural birth, because I'd been spending so much time learning to be connected to my body and out of my head and in my body and the wisdom of my body. And I just really craved a birth that was in alignment with that and allowed me to stay connected to my baby the entire time. I felt like we were, so intertwined the whole time, like never lost that sense of communication. Like even when they used the Doppler to check on her, I'm like, I know she's fine. Like, I know she's fine. It was just like this deep knowing that, she's completely fine. And, the validation of that with, numbers and Dopplers is great. But at the end of the day, like, you just get so in tune with that baby and you're like, you would know if something was wrong if it was.
Totally. Absolutely. Wow. So if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
A couple of things. I think at first I would say the most important thing I learned is just to follow your intuition. If you have a feeling or a sense that, that a home birth or a birth outside of the typical medical system is something that calls to you, then answer it, explore it. And if it feels right, just go for it. And also to surround yourself with people who believe in you. Like I said, going back to, before where I said support and community, that's people who support you from the perspective of health, the chiropractors, the midwives, the doulas, all of that, but also other mamas in community and in support, I think is super important. And yeah, I think, like I said, just following your intuition and finding your tribe that really believes in you. And then continue to listen to positive birth stories, because it's so incredible how every single one is different in terms of the progression of how things happen. And yeah, just be open to the mystery that's going to unfold for you, because it's never going to be the same as somebody else. And that's part of the beauty, I believe, in the experience.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your birth story.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, it was so impactful for me. So, if any first-time mamas hear this and they think, this is a path that I want to take for my lineage, I think of my daughter and being able to share with her how impactful and amazing my birth story was, and get her to a place where she's super excited to be able to have an experience like that for herself, I think is really healing for generations to come. So I'm excited about that, and hopeful that, anything that I do to share my story here and other places will continue to spread that awareness.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you. And I can hear your baba probably wanting the breast.
Yes. Yeah. She said she's ready for her boobs. So yes. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.